in 2006, I woke up to go to work, and I woke up with swollen legs. I was a school counselor at the time, and I got to school and I asked the school nurse what he thought may be going on. And he said, "You need to get to the emergency room right away." And then I got to the emergency room and they said, "Your kidneys are failing." My whole world, I feel like, shut down that day. Here I was, a nursing mom. I'd just gotten back into going to work and being a school counselor, doing a job that I absolutely love. And I end up in the emergency room and they're like, "You're gonna have to stop nursing. You're gonna have to stop." I mean, just everything that day stopped. And so I ended up being in the hospital for 8 days. They determined that I had FSGS, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. I had no idea what it was. I'd never heard of it again. I didn't have a family history. And so I found out that it's when a part of your kidney cells becomes scarred. I was devastated. It just happened so suddenly. Everything comes to a halt in a second. To now have to navigate through this, to figure out what FSGS was, and what life would look like after that. And so because of that, I decided to quit my job, to resign from my job, to really focus on my family and my health. So once they diagnosed the FSGS, they put me on a immunosuppressant regimen. They were able to hold them at bay with medication and slowly come off of the medicine. And so I was off of medication at least for 3 years before things began to get worse. I went to see my nephrologist shortly after. They did labs and he said, "Your numbers are starting to creep back up, Miss Rouse. And if you get the slightest cold, you could die. If anything happens, you could die because your body's not in a position to fight. It's time for us to start having a conversation about potentially preparing for dialysis." I didn't want to accept that this was going to be my life connected to a machine for 12 to 13 hours a week. And having a young child at the time, I said, well, let me think about this and determine if this is something I really want to do. I wanted to still hold out on hope that something else would come through. And so I thought about it, and the next day I decided to start dialysis. When I started having kidney concerns, and I told my family, my siblings and my parents, that I would have to start dialysis. And so my sister, she's like, "Well, you need another kidney? Like, what's going on?" And I said, "Yeah, they're saying I'm going to be on dialysis and I need a kidney."
Sharron really, she's a fighter, but she just said what she was. She wasn't sad or anything. She didn't have to ask. You needed something, and if I have it, like, it's yours. Like, you can have it. It was really no conversation other than the questions asked, like, what do I need to do? What does it involve? Like, what happens?
Again, we were still learning the process. So I had to tell her what we had been learning and the fact that you could live with one kidney. And she said, "Well, sure, I'll go get tested."
During that time, I was really depressed. I kind of lost everything, my job. I just had a baby. My son was 1 year old. I was in a relationship for 8 years. It just all went away. The feeling of no job, you have a baby, you're depending on other people. My life was spiraling out of control. At that moment, I was in a really, really dark place. I really didn't have a purpose, or I didn't know what my purpose was. Sharron always shined a light on me. She was in need and I needed a purpose. So I knew that it was going to be my kidney. I already knew it.
Shortly after I started dialysis, we knew that my sister was a match. And it was so funny because the doctors and nurses would come in like, "Oh, you're the sisters that are the perfect match." And I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?" And she said, there's 6 antigens that we look at when we're determining the level, the degree of how your kidneys are matching together. And each antigen lined up perfectly. So you're a perfect match.
When the doctors kept coming in and the nurses kept saying that, it really made me believe there was a purpose. I had a purpose the whole time. Like, that had to happen.
It's that day. Hi.
Woo-hoo. Me moving back here, everything had to happen for it to align that way. That's what kept me going. That's what kept me waking up in the morning. That's what kept me happy. Like, this is what's happening.
Since the transplant, I tell my sister all the time, like, I have my second win. I have a new lease on life, and I never want to take it for granted or even forget to tell people my story. And so that's how Kindness for Kidneys was born. It started with just a dream and a vision of wanting to do more to help others, especially in the African American community, in the minority community. That was my mission. That became my purpose. I want to do something different. I want to do something better.
If someone that you love is in need, the biggest takeaway from this that I received is give it. Whether it's attention, whether it's time, whether it's love. If you have it, give it. It's free. Did Sharron save my life or did I save hers? We saved each other.